Hi, everybody. So I have been thinking, we just had the release of Solo Star Wars Story, and I really actually enjoyed it despite having some problems. And I've been thinking about this new Star Wars franchise and the new sort of reboot with the films that we've gotten recently. And uh, and I loved The Force Awakens. I didn't like Rogue One. I had mixed feelings about The Last Jedi. I liked Reylo. I liked it was beautiful. It was overall interesting. But I had major problems with Luke. I had major problems with Leia, and some other problems with the storytelling in that movie. And I'm thinking, well, and then here with Solo, I enjoyed it, but I did have some problems with it too. And I was thinking about what is it that is making these movies, first of all, so divisive, and also making them so hit and miss, I guess, for me, and mostly kind of miss. I mean, I guess I have one I love, one I didn't like, one I have mixed feelings on, and one I liked. I guess I had another I have mixed feelings on. And I'm thinking about it that, like, here's the problem is that you have a brand that is trying to do auteur filmmaking while also trying to be a franchise. Like when I go into a McDonald's, I want to go into a McDonald's. I know what a McDonald's is. It has a brand, it's a franchise. And I think it's hard when these studios don't really, when they're trying to be really creative, which I applaud, but they don't sort of define, this is what we are and this is our formula for success. And I think that's partly what leads to all of these problems that they have with directors and people leaving and problems with scripts and actors and other things that you have. I think that obviously the Marvel movies are the ultimate example because Kevin Feige has a clear understanding of what a Marvel movie is. And some people could say that's boring, but I don't think so. I think that he's managed to get a wide array of directors that have been able to work within that formula and add their own spin and add their own character to it. And I think that's what makes those movies so satisfying is that we know what we're going to get and we know what it's going to look like, but then each time the director like Taika Waititi, Ryan Coogler, Joss Whedon, all these different directors, James Gunn, can come in and then work within that formula and add their own flair, their own creativity, their own, because it's asking quite a lot for these directors to come in and reinvent the wheel with every movie. That every movie has to be this visual sort of masterpiece, this visual, that they have to kind of create the franchise with every movie. That's really hard. And I think it leads to a feeling of sort of uncertainty or frustration or, things. It makes the films really divisive, I think, amongst the fans. Whereas, like, if somebody is a Marvel fan, then they're a Marvel fan, and there's 90% chance that they're going to like what they're going to be given. And I think that DC has had some of the same problems. Is that their films have been kind of all over the place, and it leads to studio tampering. It leads to problems with directors, problems with because there's not a clear guide of like, this is what we're trying to execute, this is what makes it good, and then we add our own sort of flourishes to the story as a director, as a creative team, as a production team. I mean, I think that we've had the same problems with like the Terminator franchise, with that hasn't had a clear idea of kind of what the franchise is. So each director just is trying to sort of reinvent the wheel, and it just ends up being really frustrating. And whereas, like, if you're not trying to build a cinematic universe, then it doesn't really matter. Like it's like, for instance, you can have a Disney movie, animated film, that are completely different and completely each director can make a completely different movie because they're not trying to connect them all. They're not trying to build a franchise. And if you're trying to build a franchise, there needs to be a certain degree of formula. Like I said, you wouldn't want to go into a McDonald's and have like Pizza Hut. Like, no, there's a formula. And just because you make a formula film doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be boring. Like most authors, if you think about a book, when I sit down to write a book, I know, okay, I'm writing this book as a young adult book. This is going to be a romance novel. This is going to be a science fiction novel. Here's sort of the key parts of that genre. I'm going to make sure to include, and so you have this base kind of formula, and then you add your creativity with creative characters. You add your creativity with your settings and your dialogue that's engaging and appealing. You don't add it with like each time you sit down to write a book, like having like a completely different genre and a completely different like, and even if you do, if you're some kind of author that just like writes completely different genres every time, you still, when you're sitting down to write that book, you're working within a formula for what that kind of book is, and then you make it entertaining within that genre. Otherwise, you have to be super talented to just completely subvert everything, and not very many people can pull that off. And I think that we've seen with some of these attempts to make subversive franchise films, like Batman v Superman, like Last Jedi, that it ends up feeling very divisive because they're, trying to kind of deconstruct what we know as Batman movie or what we know as a Star Wars movie, and that's frustrating for a lot of people. And I don't know, it's just something I've really been thinking about. That like, I've really been thinking about that. I think part of what makes a franchise work is if they know they're a franchise and they execute that franchise well. It makes everything make sense both to viewer and creator. It just makes it a more satisfying experience all around. And I think there's a lot of franchises like this that know what they are and they execute it well. I think that the Mission Impossible movies are a good example. There's a basic framework of what a Mission Impossible movie is, and then individual directors are brought in, like Brad Bird, and then each of those directors, J.J. Abrams, different people, then they come in and they add their flair, their style, their things to that franchise, to that formula. And so you sit down and you know that I'm going to watch a Mission Impossible movie, and then you watch a Mission Impossible movie and you have a really good time with what the directors can bring to a Mission Impossible movie. I think that James Bond, for the most part, has like a formula. Some of them are more comedic, some of them are more serious, but there's sort of a base formula of what makes a James Bond movie a James Bond movie. And I think that works. I think that Fast and the Furious, for the most part, some of them have been more successful than others, but there's a basic formula of this is what makes a Fast and the Furious movie, and this is why they work. And if you go sit down to watch a Fast and the Furious movie, then you know what you're getting into, and you usually, for the most part, enjoy it. And I don't know. It's just something I've really been thinking about, that if you want to have a cinematic universe with continuity, then I think you need to have a formula for what your films are and what you want. Like if I was with Lucasfilm, I would sit down and say, what is a Star Wars movie? What does that mean? What are the key attributes? What are the first 5 things that you think of when you think of Star Wars? And those are the things, the key attributes that we want to focus on. And then we let our directors go from there with their own style, their own creativity, their own. And I think it actually would make the films more creative because there's that basic framework that they can go to. And people always say, "Oh, well, what about like Edgar Wright in Marvel?" That's really been the only director that hasn't been able to work within the Marvel system, and that's only because he was working on Ant-Man way before the MCU even existed, and he wasn't even willing to play ball in that world at all. And so obviously, again, you can't have a McDonald's franchise if somebody's not willing to make Big Macs like that. Like that's just part of being a McDonald's franchise. And so that just didn't work, and they parted amicably, and everything was fine. And so that's pretty good though in all of these films to only have one movie with creative differences. Pretty impressive. I mean, I guess you could say Joss Whedon was frustrated with Age of Ultron, I guess, but still. And so let's see, Razor Wire says, where do you think they're not doing this though? They all feel like Star Wars to me: action, adventure, humor, mysticism. I don't know. I feel like, like Rogue One was trying to be this war movie, and Last Jedi was like kind of trying to deconstruct the Star Wars formula, in my opinion. It was literally trying to throw what the fans and what people knew as a Star Wars movie, throw it kind of in their face. Like the opening shot is literally Luke throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder. I think that's not going to appeal to everyone, that's for sure. And I admire the risk taking, but I think that it's not for a franchise. I think that it's not very satisfying in the end. It feels, I don't know. To me, the most satisfying of these Star Wars movies have been the two that have been followed the Star Wars formula, meaning Force Awakens and Solo, the Star Wars story. To me, those have been space adventures. They've been pulpy. They've been fun. They've had the snappy dialogue. There's been a consistent feel, to me at least, and that's what they'd have to decide to do, is decide what it is exactly that we're trying to do with these Star Wars movies. Because right now it just feels kind of chaotic and random. I sit down and I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know what kind of style, what kind of story I'm going to get. And that can be kind of unsettling. It can be kind of frustrating, I think. And so it's just, I think that's been taken a bit too literally. Like when Kylo says, "Let the past die," some people have said they think that's the actual message to the audience, which it isn't. Interesting. I think that I don't know if I 100% agree with you. Okay, so you didn't think Solo was against the Star Wars formula, I was going to say. Yeah. So I really think that Rian Johnson was trying to basically deconstruct the Star Wars formula, and he was trying to subvert what people expected in a lot of ways. And some people can really admire that as bold filmmaking, and I do in a sense, but in a sense it was frustrating for me. And I don't hate the movie. I think it's a mixed movie. I think some stuff did not work for me at all, like Space Leia and hologramming Luke. I did not like that at all. But I don't know. I just think that a good franchise that's going to be able to produce reliable results and have like a creative team that sort of enjoys working on their films, and I guess Rian Johnson did, but I'm just saying, like, it seems like these productions have been very messy, and I think that that comes from sort of a lack of like a steady hand that like knows what they're trying to do, and I don't know, it just all feels a little like chaotic and random to me. And I feel like that's been the case with definitely with the DCEU films, and I think that's true with the Star Wars films. That there's just something about it that feels like they're trying to make auteur films in a franchise, and I don't know if that really works. I mean, it's something even like to go back to the prequels with Star Wars. I think that that's part of the reason why even those don't work, even though it's literally it's the auteur's vision from the beginning. But I feel like in the original trilogy, they were more focused on making formula films that would sell and would do well at the box office. And so they end up, and then you have directors like Irving Kershing who can come in and kind of add his flair and add his feeling and add his color and light and everything like that to this sort of formula. And then when you went like all auteur in the prequels, and he was just allowed to, George Lucas didn't have to worry about the whole box office thing, then I don't know, it didn't really work. There's a lot of good ideas and interesting ideas and beautiful imagery in the prequels, but I don't know, it doesn't really work to me. I don't know. So I don't know if any of this makes sense, but it's just something I've been thinking about, that like the idea of sort of a formula film has sort of like immediately people like bristle at that idea. But actually, I think it can be a mode for more creativity, not less creativity, because it gives these filmmakers sort of a set guide of kind of here's what you're working in, and then go from there and add your creativity. And I don't know if that makes sense. So his commentary is very interesting. I understand why you're mixed on The Last Jedi for sure. That's certainly fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I loved Reylo in Last Jedi. That was my favorite part, but that was probably the part that was the most sort of traditional and kind of keeping with the franchise, because there's always been these kind of romantic chemistry, kind of action, kind of scenes. There's been these couplings within Star Wars that are kind of part of the formula in a way. And of course, it was in a Rian Johnson version of that, but I don't know. The moments in Last Jedi that I liked were probably the more traditional and the less subversive, because I'm not the most subversive person in the world. But I don't know. It's just something I've been thinking about. And like, if they want to make really risky films, I almost wish they wouldn't worry about continuity or canon. They would just, be like Pixar or something like that, and just make individual movies that, and that'd be fine with me. I don't understand why everything in the world has to connect, but if you want everything to connect, it's pretty hard when you have just these very different films coming out. I think anybody would admit that at least all four of these Star Wars films have been pretty different in feel and tone and style and everything like that. And you could say that's a good thing, but I don't know. There's something about it that's somewhat unsatisfying in the end for me. Whereas like the original trilogy, they have little differences in flair, in style, in things, but they still feel like a cohesive unit of films. I don't know. So anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense, but this is something I've been thinking about. So let me know what you think about this in the comment section or on Twitter. Just message me. And what are some other franchises that you think kind of have a handle on what their formula is, and they kind of and then they execute that well? I mean, I think Star Trek has had their ups and downs as far as their formula. we always say the even movies are the good ones in Star Trek. Uh, so I don't know. That's an interesting one to kind of think about as well. Certainly something like Doctor Who, even though that's TV, has their kind of their formula that makes them work. It says, I think it's fair to start the new trilogy with something very familiar and then do something different in the second one. Change keeps it fresh. I think change within like a basic template, like something like I think there's quite a bit different in between, let's say, Guardians of the Galaxy versus versus the Avengers. Like there's enough different in there, but it still feels like they both feel like Marvel movies to me. And I enjoy that all four of the new films have been quite different. Solo was such a welcome burst of lightness amidst all the heavy of the past two. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy it. I feel like more in theory than in actual execution. Like in theory, I think that sounds great. Have each of the movies be really different and creative, but in execution, I don't know. I think I want them to have more of a formula. And that's my main message. Like, I want to go, when I go to a Star Wars movie, like I said, I go to a McDonald's, I want to be able to buy a Big Mac. It's the same kind of thing. Like, I go to a Star Wars movie, I want to have certain elements and to feel. So that's kind of what I think. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. And I certainly think if they want to take this this approach, I think it's a huge mistake to spend $250 million. Like, if they were making these movies for like small budgets, then go for it. Like, take all the risk that you want. But man, if you're going to spend $250 million on your movie, I wouldn't take all those risks, but that's just me. But I don't think that a formula film is inherently boring. I think you can do tons of stuff. And I think that as an audience member, it's actually kind of satisfying. And like I said, when I sit down to read a novel, I know what genre that novel is. I know the basic framework of the type of characters I'm going to get, the type of story I'm going to read. And then it's up to the director, it's up to the author to engage me with engaging characters, story, setting, dialogue. All of that stuff can all be different, but it can all work within a formula. So that's my thoughts. I don't know. Curious to know what you think. And thanks for listening to me ramble about Star Wars. And maybe I'll go see Solo again today because I really did enjoy it. So that's just me. So, all right, that's it. I think I said it all. And so thanks so much. And let me know what you think. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.